Okay, we're going to be taking a look at Spacecorp 2025 to 2300 AD, designed by John Butterfield and published by GMT Games. Just came out at the end of 2018. Now, before I start the video on the game in particular, I'm going to make a few comments on space games in general as I lay out the pieces. Alright, my first interest in space travel occurred in 1968. I was in high school then, and I was just amazed by Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which you saw at the theater in '68 and just blew me away. These are the DVD editions of it. And of course, Arthur C. Clarke's novel from the movie just blew me away. Just loved it. Clarke did write several more in the series, 2010, 2061, and the last one in his, what he euphemistically calls a trilogy, is 3001. So this is where I'm coming from in space travel. And in more recent times, I'm also a movie buff. I love movies. I was influenced a lot by the very good movie Interstellar, which is almost to me like the 2001 of this generation. This is more about a journey to the stars. So that's where I'm coming from with space movies and space interest in general. I got into war games in about 1969, and I've always wanted a good space game. And over the years, I bought several, but none of them have hit that sweet spot. The only one I really liked from that era was Triplanetary by I think it was GDW, and it concerned space travel within the solar system. And the game obeyed Newtonian physics, which spacecraft traveled like spacecraft in straight lines from one planet to another. They weren't like Star Wars, where all the spaceships just act like airplanes in space. So that's where I'm coming from, the kind of space game that I was looking for. So when Spacecorp came along, I didn't pre-order it or anything like that. I just waited till it came out. I got my copy a few weeks ago, and I'm very favorably impressed with it. And we're going to look at some of the pieces, and look at the methodology that John Butterfield used to create his space game. Because I'd always wanted to do a space game myself, my son also, but we never could get around the immensity of the solar system to make a game on it work. And I think John's solution to that problem is very elegant. And with no further ado, let's see what John has done. One of the problems about designing a space game, even in our solar system, is the sheer size of space itself. And I mean here, converting it to physical space in a war game is very difficult. I know when I was designing one, I had a hard time showing the distances from, let's say, the Earth to the Moon, Earth to Mars, and then trying to get it out to Jupiter. Now, John handles this problem very elegantly by dividing the game into 3 eras. He calls Era 1 the Mariners period, which concerns the Earth, Luna, and out to Mars and the asteroid belt on one board. Later on, when you graduate to the next level, and you begin to go to the outer solar system, the outer solar system covers past the asteroid belt, here's their inner solar system, out to Jupiter and its moons, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, out to Pluto, and then out here to this OORT cloud. So that's how he handles it. And then if you get to the 3rd era, which most games start with, you get to this Starfarers era, where I guess man is designed faster than light speed, and you can jump out to the nearest stars. Now, I've played it face-to-face just a couple of times now, and I'm still learning the Mariners period. I'm quite content with learning the game that way. It's a great game, really good. There's no dice in it, too. Now, I'm going to show you some of the components and try to explain a little what John has done. To show the different eras, the game comes with 3 complete different decks. This is the Mariners era, identified by the little wee moon symbol on the cards. The next era is the Planeteers, identified by the little wee Saturn planet on it. And then finally the Starfarers era with the stars on it. So it's almost 3 complete games. Of course, you can play kind of the campaign game where you go through all 3 eras. Now, when we played the Mariners era, I think it took us maybe an hour and a half to play it. We still had to look up some rules. So I don't know how long it'll take to play the whole game yet. I just have no experience with it. But the decks are very nicely crafted to the era. So you're going to get a lot of movement cards in the Mariners deck. Things like the Chemical Drive, Explorer cards, build modules, heavy lifting, and of course the other decks, which I'm not familiar with, obviously reflect more the faster than light speed aspects of the game. So the decks are unique to each era. Now the game can be played with up to 4 players, and I would think that it shines better as a 4-player game. I played the Mariners era with a friend of mine, and my girlfriend and I tried it, and we quite liked it. But I suspect the 2-player game is kind of your vanilla game. I think it will probably play better with multiplayers, and I'm looking forward to playing that. You get 4 different colors: the green, blue, purple, and yellow. One thing I did like about this game is you're not playing the United States, you're not playing Russia, you're not playing any earthly country. You're playing like the equivalent of a corporation, like Spacecorp. You're kind of like Elon Musk and driving your company to make money and exploit the solar system and head out to the stars. It's kind of visionary that way. I like it. It's not political. So in the game, some of the pieces, you get 2 little wee blocks, which are your space teams. That's what comes with the game. And years ago at a convention, I saw these cool little rockets, which I bought because someday I'd like to design a space game. So I bought them in anticipation, and I'm glad I did, because when we play it now, we don't use the little blocks. I just have to use these little cool rockets, but that's only me. You get a whole bunch of these tiles. These depend on the kind of things you build. I think you can build an exploiter, a spaceport, a biolab. These are all things you can buy and create on the board. And each color has its own set of markers. Very easy to set up, by the way. You can set the game up in less than 5 minutes. Now for the time being, I'll continue with these long-range views of the game, but very soon I'll zoom in so you can see the game a little bit better. The general objective of the game is to get your corporation to make as much profit as possible, and each of these little notches represents $1 trillion. That's the basic unit of monetary concerns in this game. I could probably identify with billions. Trillions is a little hard for me to grasp, but that's what the basic unit is. So you're trying to get your color to make as much money as possible. And this is done by doing common sense things in this era. Example, putting a base on the moon, exploring other planets, creating Lagrange points around the Earth. And this chart represents the contracts that would give you more money. Example, if you were the first to produce, do a production action in the game, you would take this marker off and you would get $2 trillion on your track. The first person to create 4 Lagrange bases would get 3 trillion. This would come off. These contracts can only be awarded once. Here's another example. The first base on Mars, you get $3 trillion. So by doing these actions, and this row represents the Mariners actions, this is the Planeteers, that's the stars, you get more money. So you're trying to, essentially though, you're trying to get your track ahead of everybody else. And that's done by exploring and producing things. at appropriate times in the game. You will be drawing new cards, of course, from the draw deck, right here. Or you could be drawing from these, what they call offers. These, you can see what they are. Let's say in the game you need, wow, I need a build card really bad. Rather than risk drawing a card from the deck, you might want to take one of these offers instead and put it on your side of the board. And the offers are always refilled from the deck. So if a player takes a card from the offers, you take a card from the draw deck and put it back in the offers. So sometimes you're going to want to take cards from the offers over drawing from the deck. The game comes with these beautifully mounted on very thick cardboard stock. This is like your home panel. And there's a bunch of them. Remember, it is a 4-player game. And there's different panels for different eras. So watch out for that when you're setting up the game. Now I'll pick the one for the Mariners, which has all 3 symbols on it here, the lower right. That's the panel you would have if playing the Planeteers level. And what this means is, it's like you have these automatic cards there. You always have this move 1 in for slot 1 and the research card. So you can play, when it comes your turn, these 2 cards can always be played once. These are your bases, the symbols for the bases. The sequence of play is right here, right on the board. And I haven't got through to this on the Mariners level. There's also a level where you put these little markers on here, and it's your progress wheel. And it's my understanding from the rules, if you advance these cubes, it will help you later in the next level, the Planeteers level, and perhaps even the star level, the progress wheel. There are 2 blank infrastructure slots, which you can later fill. For example, let's say you took this card and put it on infra slot 2. This becomes hardwired into your infrastructure. It means that this card can be played each turn and doesn't count as your hand being played. So you can build infrastructure to help you move on the board. Now we'll zoom in a little bit to show you how movement and exploration works, which is kind of the heart of the game, the part of the game that I like the best. Okay, let's try to show you a typical move by the green player. Let's say he wanted to take one of his rocket ships, or space teams they call them, and go to the moon. He'd need movement factors of at least 4. So let's say in his hand he had those 2 cards, move 2, move 1, and of course in his infrastructure he's got 1, which equals 4. So he's got 4 movement points. So how would that occur? Well, it always costs you 1 to blast off from a planet to enter the ring. So that's 1 to blast off, plus 2 for the Earth's gravity, total of 3, and then 1 to get to the moon. The moon doesn't have enough gravity, he can land. So that would be a typical move, 4 movement points. So movement is not that complex. But to get to the outer planets, we'll do a more complex move. Now, what's the cost to go to Mars? Let's illustrate that first. Now on the board they have this nice little guide which helps you if you get confused about the costs. So Luna, as you can see, is 4, which I've just illustrated. And Mars is 9, so it's over double the distance in time and resources. And let's see how that is achieved. Well, as we said, it takes 1 to blast off from the Earth, plus the gravity well, which is 3. So you're in this area. When you go to the next ring, you have to pay the cost here to enter the next ring. So we're at 3, you would spend 4. Then you're in this ring. If you wanted to get to the next ring, which is Mars, you'd have to pay 3 more here. 4 plus 3, 7. Then, if you wanted to continue on to Mars, 1 more, 8. And then you have to look at Mars gravity well, which is 1 more, 9. So it takes 9 movement points to get to Mars. No big deal, you say. Well, you would have to accumulate course, 9 movement points and your infrastructure. So it'll take a little bit longer to get to Mars and you have to spend more resources. But that's basically how movement works. And each turn you're allowed to move both teams, even with one set of cards. That's why there's 2 markers for each player. So one fellow could have one spaceship go to Luna, and another one, let's say, go to one of the Lagrange points. Let's see how much it would cost to go to one of the Lagrange points here. Solar Lagrange point 5. 1 to blast off, plus the gravity, 3. Another one to go into that square, 4, and 5. And we'll check our Lagrange points, and it would be 5. So if the fellow had enough movement points to go to Mars, he could send a second team to one of the Lagrange points. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the term Lagrange point, it represents that space between 2 celestial bodies that is like neutral ground. And in the game, you can one of the things you can do is build space stations at these Lagrange points. And what that does is your space missions can leave these Lagrange points, and then you don't pay the gravity cost of leaving the Earth. So there's all kinds of elegant little things you can do to simulate space travel in this era. Now the game comes with several charts mounted again on good quality stock, which summarize the rules for you. Now, for example, the Spaceport. Let's take a look at that if I can get that in focus. What's the reason to create a spaceport? Well, it says the active player may have each moving team that begins at a spaceport gain move 2. So if at the beginning of a turn you've got one of your scientific teams here at a spaceport, you gain 2 in movement. Plus your cards, of course. So leaving a spaceport gives you automatically 2 movement points. So they're nice jumping off points to other places on the board. Now, one of the aspects of the game that I really, really like is this cooperative set of rules. Let me explain how those work. All right. One of the really neat things about this game is the cooperation and competitive aspect of the game. This is not a space combat game. I've always thought space combat games, especially at the speed of light kind of variations, the star level, combat is rather, in my opinion, absurd. And certainly combat within the solar system to me seems absurd too. Spaceships are not airplanes. They don't move like jet fighters like they do in movies like Star Wars, things like that. But in this game, you can actually use your opponent's base. You don't always have to have your own base. So let's say, for example, the green player here wanted to use Spaceport built by the blue player. He can do so and blast off and get those 2 extra movement points. But if you use your opponent's resources or base, he gets to draw 1 card from the draw deck, which could give him a nice advantage if he drew that card, for example. So it's cooperative and competitive at the same time. Now, in a 2-player game, we found we weren't using the opponent's resources very much because in a 2-player game, you really needed to take advantage of that move to make it pay off. Giving your opponent a card certainly isn't the way to do it. Perhaps in a 4-player game, it might be more interactive. I don't know. But in this example, if using your opponent's spaceport gets you to Mars first, it may be worth it because the first person to build a base on Mars gets $3 trillion and you take this thing off. Of course, you must build the base. But I do like that cooperative, competitive aspect of the game very much instead of combat. Okay, in the game you get these 3 sets of explorer tiles, which you'll want to divide into the Planeteers era, the Mariners era, and the Starfarers. What are these used for? Well, let's take a look in the Planeteers level, how they work. Okay, one handy thing or player aid is this card that describes the actions you can do. And players can do all kinds of actions each turn, depending on what cards they have in their hand. Alright, so let's say we've got a spacecraft here, the green team. He's on the north face of Mars. He's landed there already. Alright, and he wants to explore it. Well, this tells us what he has to do. It says, draw and place a discovery tile in each explorer box at a site occupied by your team. The green player is there, so he's occupied it. Your explorer value must be equal to or greater than the site's explorer cost, the E number. Place your team atop the tile to claim it. Now, if we look at the North Mars Explorer box, it says E2. So the green player would have to have the equivalent of E2 in his cards. Now, if this had been his hand, in this case, he would not be able to explore Mars because he doesn't have the equivalent E2 in cards. Now, let's say for the sake of argument, he had these two cards. Well, he could play them, add them up, explore 2, he now can explore Mars. And when he does so, he draws randomly from the E2 set of tiles. Let's see what he gets. Okay, so after expending his 2 explore points, as I mentioned, the green player would draw from the E2 tile. Why E2? Because the box says E2. There are also tiles that have E1. These would be pre-shuffled before the game. So he would draw the top tile, flip it, and see what he gets. And he's got a very nice tile. They've discovered water on Mars, which is a very nice thing to discover. We know that H2O is the source of all our life, kind of. Very important. Anyway, immediately he gets $1 trillion for that find, and he would move his marker. I don't have the green marker there, but the green marker would move up 1 trillion, up that notch. Also, a lasting benefit is this base construction. You can see a -3, that if he constructs a base on Mars, it will be 3 trillion less to build it. What you then do is put the tile on the space, put your little rocket ship on it, or space team. That shows that you've discovered water and you get the benefit of the -3. And the game proceeds along this way, exploring all different parts of the solar system. Phobos, Deimos, which is Mars, moons. They have E1 tiles. Let's say for the sake of argument, he had 1 explorer left, and he had his other team on, let's say, Deimos over here. He would draw a tile from the E1 box, flip, and this one, it says Special Discovery. Discard this tile and draw an E2 tile. So each of these tiles, as you draw them, will have all kinds of unexpected things happening. And he would draw an E2. What does that say? It says discard this tile, draw an E3 tile. Oh, that's a mistake, right? Because notice these are in the, made a mistake already. That's in the Planeteers level. I picked the wrong set of tiles here. Yeah, we've got the wrong set of tiles. Be careful of that when you're sorting your counters. You've got to make sure you pick the proper symbol of tiles. It has to be these moon ones. Let me just do that again with the proper tiles. Okay, repeating our example again with the proper tiles. The North Mars is to be explored by drawing an E2 tile. So we'll draw the E2 tile, flip it, and yeah, it makes a bit more sense. And that's exotic elements, which yields $2 trillion. So you'd move your marker over there, 2 trillion. And once a base is made, it'll give you a +1. I think in resources, I'd have to actually look up to see what a base does, but it's plus. So you would put the tile again on the North Mars square, put your rocket on it, or space team I should say, and shows green has found those exotic elements first and got the reward for it. Now if you had one explore point left, remember that's on the cards themselves, the explore, he could explore Deimos. And if he did so, Deimos is an E1, he would draw an E1 tile. So he does, he draws it, flips it, and this one is abundant ores, and which means because of the abundant ores on Deimos, he could make a base 2 less than normal. So these tiles have been created and seeded by John to show the era. For example, you're not going to find a tile with meeting an alien civilization on the Mariners level. You know, we haven't met any aliens yet, and not too likely we're going to within the solar system. It's just not going to happen. So the tiles are geared to the era. I have not played the Starfarers era, but I remember seeing kind of an alien race one in here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. And that little green icon, I think, is life. Yeah, there's aquatic life and stuff. That's other eras. This gives you an idea of what the game is like. There's much more to the Mariners era that I'm showing, because there's all kinds of different things you can do in your turn. I'll briefly describe some of the actions you can do in your turn, and then we'll wrap up the video. I'm trying to do this as an introduction to the game, certainly not trying to teach you the game. You've got a great turn sequence here that's explained fully on the card. So the cards and player aids are great in this game. Can't fault it for that at all. One of the things you can do is just research. And each of your base, your infrastructure, always has a research card. So you can always burn up a card to do research. And when you do that, it says if you have 7 or fewer cards, draw cards equal to your research value. So if you've got a research value of 2, you draw 2 cards. So that's one thing you can do. Second one, of course, is move, which I showed. You move your space teams to other parts of the solar system. The explore action we've seen. That's drawing a tile. I did not show the build action, but build, you can build a research station, a spaceport, a biolab, depending on what has been found on the planet. So what you find and discover on the planet influences your decision in the next turn. Another one is produce. I didn't show that action. Let's say you found some exotic ores on a planet. You can exploit that and start producing them, and then you get trillions of dollars for that. And then there's also genetics revelation. That's moving the black cube, which I described, I think, before, along your track on the your infrastructure. But that, I think, affects your game in the next era. And in the advanced eras, you can establish a colony. So there's many more things to this game I can possibly show to you in an introductory video. There are 2 complete rule books. One is based on solo play. You can play this solo, and there's a whole book of rules just for that. And of course the multiplayer, 2 to 4 players. This is the one I've been looking at. I have not looked at the solo play, but apparently it's pretty good too. So, like I said, I've only got 2 games under my belt in a 2-player. My girlfriend loved the game, and my son did too. So, I can highly recommend Spacecorp. Now, it's my cup of tea. It's exploration within the solar system and eventually out to the stars on a level and I can understand. It's not a complex game, but it's a good game. So, can I recommend Spacecorp? Yeah, I can. If you like space travel and not space combat, this is your cup of tea. If you prefer the kind of space games where you're fighting aliens and destroying things, this is not your game. This one I find is just a bit more realistic. Anyway, that's Spacecorp by John Butterfield, published by GMT. Thank you for watching.